SF Gov TV, San Francisco Government Television. SF Gov TV, San Francisco Government Television.
All right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This meeting will come to order. This is the regular meeting of the Land Use and Transportation Committee. My name is Supervisor Malia Cohen. I'm the chair of this committee. To my right is Supervisor Scott Wiener, the vice chair. And to my left is Supervisor Aaron Peskin. He will be joining us shortly. Our clerk today is Mr. Victor Young, and I'd like to take a moment to thank Jesse Larson and Phil Jackson from SFGov TV for broadcasting this meeting today. Mr. Clerk, do you have any announcements?
Yes, please silence all cell phones and electronic devices. Completed speaker cards and copies of any documents to include as part of the file should be submitted to the clerk. Items acted upon today will appear on the May 24th, 2016 Board of Supervisors meeting unless otherwise stated.
All right, thank you so much. Well, colleague Supervisor Farrell is the sponsor of this item, and he is here, and I'm going to turn the rest of the meeting over to him.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Chairwoman, call item number 1.
Oh, yes, please call item number 1.
Item number 1. Ordinance amending the police code to prohibit any persons from keeping a firearm within any residence unless the firearm is stored in a locked container or disabled with the trigger lock.
Thank you again, Madam Chairwoman. So, colleagues, gun violence continues to be a large issue not only across our country but here in San Francisco. And one of the leading factors continues to be the unsafe storage of firearms. A number of us last year during a number of the violent shootings here in San Francisco did a significant amount of work in this arena, and this is follow-up legislation because currently under San Francisco law, only handguns and no other long guns such as rifles or shotguns are subject to lock container and trigger lock requirements. Again, I do want to thank my colleagues, including Supervisor Cohen, Supervisor Campos, who have done passed a number of pieces of legislation in this arena over the last year. This proposal will close a loophole that exists in current law and mandate that all firearms, not just handguns, be properly stored and have proper trigger locks that are on the California Department of Justice list. A recent study found that over 1.6 million children and youth under the age of 18 were living in homes with loaded and unlocked firearms. And another study found that 73% of children under the age of 10 were living in homes with guns reported knowing the location of their parents' firearms. According to the Bureau of Justice Statistics, a program in the U.S. DOJ, close to 90,000 firearms are stolen each year during residential burglaries, and approximately 15% of those are used in subsequent crimes. While this legislation itself was not in response to any incident that happened on the streets of San Francisco, thankfully, I personally don't believe in waiting for disaster to happen. This was a glaring loophole in our law that was discovered and we talked about last year. I'm proud to finally have it come to committee right now. I do want to thank very quickly both Allison and Julie in particular from the Law Center to Prevent Gun Violence. They've been tremendous advocates in this arena over the past few years here in San Francisco. I want to thank them for their assistance. I want to thank Jess Montejano from my office, Catherine Stephanie previously of my office, who's now our county clerk, for all the work they've put into this issue. I do believe we owe it to our families here in San Francisco to be as aggressive as we can around gun storage laws. So, colleagues, I hope to have your support, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Supervisor Farrell. Colleagues, they're saying that there's no one in the queue. Let's go ahead and take public comment. To any member of the public, please come up to the podium. Just as a reminder, you'll have 2 minutes. You'll hear a soft chime indicating that you'll have 30 seconds left on your time.
Hi, I'm Allison Anderman. I'm an attorney at the Law Center to Prevent Gun Violence. Thank you very much for considering amending San Francisco's existing ordinance to safe storage ordinance, and these amendments would require guns kept in any residence, not just the residence of the gun owner, to be safely stored. It would apply to all firearms, not only handguns, and require locked containers that are used to be listed on the California roster of approved firearm safety devices. This legislation is very important because accidental shootings by children is still a significant problem in our country. A Washington Post report in 2015 showed that toddlers were responsible for an average of 1 shooting per week that year. On May 1st, the Post reported that in 2016, the pace of shootings by toddlers had accelerated. Unlocked guns in the home are also susceptible to theft during home invasion. As Supervisor Farrell mentioned, the U.S. Department of Justice reports that almost 90,000 firearms are stolen each year during residential burglaries. And unlocked guns in the home are available to people who want to do harm. Let us not forget that the Sandy Hook shooter who massacred 20 first graders and 6 of their educators used guns he took from his mother's unsecured arsenal. This legislation will make firearms less likely to fall into the hands of unauthorized users such as toddlers, burglars, and suicidal teens. It does this by closing a loophole that would allow visitors in the home, such as the boyfriend of a woman who had children, to leave their guns lying around. It would also require long guns to be stored safely. Accidental shootings by children with long guns are well documented. And it would require that gun safes that are used to comply with the safe storage law to be listed on the California roster of approved safety devices to ensure that they are reasonably tamper-resistant and secure. Forbes published a study in 2012 reporting that even a 3-year-old can open several types of popular gun safes. These amendments, like the Safe Storage Ordinance itself, are consistent with the Second Amendment because gun owners may carry a loaded weapon on their bodies within a residence. Furthermore, gun owners can access a safely stored firearm in a matter of seconds. Thank you, Supervisor Farrell and the rest of the board, for your consideration of this important legislation.
At this time, thank you. Colleagues, is there a motion or discussion on,
I'm
sorry,
sure.
Supervisor.
Apologies real quick to our city attorney. I believe there's one type of clerical error that the city attorney was going to
Sure.
correct.
Deputy City Attorney John Givner. On page 3, line 6, the word handgun, which is in the current code, is missing. So after the committee passes this item out, we will just submit a clean version to the clerk with the clerical error corrected. I don't think it's the type of item where the committee would make an amendment because it's just been deleted basically in the wrong font.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Mr. Deputy City Attorney. Colleagues, is there a motion on this item? Supervisor Weiner, Supervisor Peskin? All right, all right. A motion made to move with a positive recommendation. Unanimous. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Clerk, could you please call item 2?
Item number 2, resolution approving an option agreement for the potential sale of Transbay Block 4, the northern one-third of the block bounded by Beale, Howard, Main, and Folsom Streets, by the successor agency to the San Francisco Redevelopment Agency to F4 Transbay Partner LLC for $45 million.
All right, thank you. I believe we've got Ms. Sally Orth from OCC here with us to present on this item.
Yes, good afternoon, supervisors. I have some copies of the presentation for the supervisors as well as some copies for the public. I'd like
Thank
to
you.
clerk. So again, Sally Orth, Deputy Director with the Office of Community Investment and Infrastructure. And I'm here before you today to seek approval for an option agreement with F4 Transbay Partners LLC for Transbay Block 4 for a sales price of $45 million. And my agenda for today is I'll give some background on Block 4 itself, as well as Parcel F, another parcel within the Transbay redevelopment project area that is related to the matter before you. I'll provide some of the terms of the option agreement and discuss the determination that's before the board, which is a fair market value analysis of the sales price of $45 million. Some other considerations that we looked at during our staff analysis, and then finally some next steps. So here is a map of the Transbay redevelopment project area. It's divided into 2 zones. Zone 1, which has the majority of the former state-owned parcels that are part of the overall redevelopment of Transbay, and that's the lower portion there. Block 4, you can see, is circled on the right-hand side. If you're familiar with that neighborhood, it's currently on the site of the temporary transit center or bus terminal that is actually taking up Block 2, 3, and 4. Parcel F is adjacent to the transit center itself, and I'll go into a little bit more detail about each parcel. So Block 4 is what's in Zone 1 of the redevelopment project area. This is under OCII land use jurisdiction. As I said, it's currently the site of the temporary terminal. It's zoned for a tower of up to 450 feet. It has adjacent 85 and 65-foot mid-rise buildings along with 50-foot townhomes and is zoned for residential use. Would have shared open space and parking. It will need to be a mixed income project. Part of our requirements on the Transbay redevelopment project area are that the entire project area must ensure that 35% of new residential units are affordable to low and moderate income households. And based on our projections of the projects we're working on right now and upcoming pipeline projects within the entire district, we estimate that at least 45% or approximately half of Block 4 would need to be affordable in order to keep us on track with the 35% district-wide goal. I'm sorry. Here is an example of massing. This is not an actual project proposal. I'll go into later that we don't have specifics yet on the exact project since we're just at the option agreement stage. But based on the massing guidelines in our design controls, this is gives you a flavor for what you'd see. You'd see the tower, some mid-rise building, and the townhomes facing onto what we call Transbay Park for now. This is our Block 3 that will be developed by OCII at a future date. As I mentioned, Parcel F is related to this project. That is a TJPA-owned parcel in Zone 2 of the redevelopment project area. It's adjacent to the transit center. It's zoned for 750 feet. Zone 2 has land use jurisdiction designated to the city's planning department through a delegation agreement, so it doesn't fall strictly under OCII land use jurisdiction. As you may be familiar with an auction process the TJPA undertook last year for Parcel F to generate sales proceeds for the transit center. Ultimately, the auction process wasn't held, but the TJPA continued to have negotiations with their pre-qualified bidders. One of those pre-qualified bidders was Urban Pacific, and they brought on Hines Development, which is also working on the Salesforce Tower, and also Goldman Sachs, which has also provided financing for some of the TGPA financing, and so they're very familiar with the Transbay area and these projects. And they submitted an offer to the TJPA for Parcel F, but also included an offer for Block 4, seeing these two projects work together. Right now, what we know about Parcel F is they're contemplating a mixed-use project that would have office at the lower portion, hotel in the middle, and then residential at the top. The TJPA board approved a purchase and sale agreement with the developer for Parcel F for $160 million in March of this year. And a condition of that purchase and sale agreement is that there be an approval of the option on Block 4 from OCII. So we negotiated that option agreement, which was approved by our commission in April. And the purchase price is $45 million. That price could be lowered as we get into the project through negotiation or an appraisal. If that were to be the case, that it was lower, we would come back to the board for a separate fair market value determination. I will note, though, that as I mentioned, the site is on the location of the current temporary transit center. So if for some reason the removal of the temporary terminal was delayed, there is a discount provided for if the site were not available in 2018 when we anticipate it would be. But ultimately, the purchase price must be determined to be of equal or greater fair market value, and that's why we're here before you today. The developer will deposit $500,000 with OCII at approval, which covers all of our costs during the option period, with an option for another $100,000 should we need it to cover costs. And most importantly, the developer has agreed, though, to provide for 45% affordable housing in this project with no OCI subsidy. So that is a significant contribution to this project. And as I mentioned, our commission approved the option agreement on April 19th of this year. So other considerations about the option agreement is that it lasts until 2018, so it gives us, fall of 2018 gives us a little over 2 years to work with. That's about the average time frame it takes for any of our Transbay blocks to move through the design process and the negotiations around the development agreement. And during that time, we would work together to refine the project concept, the schematic design, and those DDA terms. Something that the option agreement also includes, though, is that we would have approval rights over Parcel F's residential component. And as I mentioned, it's not strictly within our purview as it's in Zone 2, and that will go through the planning department. But because the amount of residential units that might come in Parcel F is so important to us in understanding how we meet our 35% district-wide requirement, we have approval rights over that to know exactly how many units, what kind of housing it might be. One thing that we would anticipate happening during both Block 4 and Parcel F's development as they continue to refine the project could be an analysis to look at whether it would make sense to offsite any of the affordable housing from Parcel F to Block 4. As we know, there have been challenges in including affordable housing at the top of a high-rise tower. And so we may look at seeing if Block 4 is a more appropriate site, if there are better services available. As I said, we don't know yet enough about either project to say whether we would do that. I just wanted to flag that that's a possible analysis. If that were to be a proposal made, we would come back to the board for a separate approval, so you would be able to evaluate that and make your determination at that time. We're requiring, though, that the developer bring on an affordable housing developer with experience in providing affordable housing. A 45% affordable housing project is a significant amount, and we want to make sure we have all the expertise we need. One thing that was important for us to flag at this point, while we're just at the beginning and it's an option agreement, we did want to signal that we have a couple of community benefits goals that we will be wanting to work on right away. One is making sure that we're incorporating all the best practices and doing as much as we can for our certificate of preference holders and other impacted communities for the affordable housing. In fact, the developers agreed that part of the $500,000 deposit will go towards some research and surveying of certificate of preference holders to make sure we're learning as much as we can and providing all the services we need in time for them to be successful in this housing. But also, we're seeking to develop a robust community benefits plan that will include maximizing workforce development and contracting opportunities, particularly for small businesses and economically disadvantaged San Francisco residents and businesses. And also making sure that the ground floor space, as is typical with these projects, there's ground floor retail and other commercial uses, and we want to make sure that those are focused on community serving space that may be available to entities such as local nonprofits or small businesses that could be provided at below market rates or other terms to help us create the most diverse and inclusive neighborhood that we can. So now to get to the meat of the item, which is the fair market value determination. And so we're required to have this determination made under state law, under California Health and Safety Code, Section 33433. And that is the property the consideration for their property must constitute fair market value. And so we've provided to you in your board file what we call a Section 33433 report, which includes a copy of the option agreement, an analysis if there's any cost to us as the agency disposing of the land, in this case zero for us because the developer's funding all of our costs. Does this disposition help eliminate blight? Our analysis is yes, because it's turning a vacant lot into a residential project. And then what is the estimated value? Again, since we don't have a specific project before you at this time, we've used some parameters to come up with what we think are some reasonable hypothetical development scenarios. We've done some massing studies and estimate that, around 480 units is a reasonable estimate of 47 floors for the tower. And we looked at both a 100% rental scenario where all the units were offered at rental, as well as a rental and condo scenario. We've seen that on some of our other Transbay blocks where the top of the tower might include some for sale market rate homes and then a mixture of market rate and affordable rental. And we looked at where those would be distributed amongst the tower, if there would be any subsidy from us, which in this case would be zero, and what the development costs and revenues would be from each type of unit. And we came up with an adjusted value then for what we thought the fair market value of the lot was. And in a rental scenario, we came up with an estimate of $18.6 million. And on a rental and condo scenario, it was higher at $41.5 million, which assured us that the offer of $45 million does in fact meet the requirement that it is fair market value. We feel this is a very strong offer from the developer, and staff feels confident that we are achieving the state-mandated requirement for fair market value. So Another consideration is that this does facilitate the sale of Parcel F, which is critical to the transit center funding. And because they're providing at least 45% of the units at their cost, which is the highest developer subsidy to date on our projects in Transbay, that is a real significant community benefit. Of course, all the other terms of a project, as typical with this, would be worked out in our development and disposition agreement, which would go back before the OCI Commission. That would include who the affordable developer is, what their design concept is, and the various community benefits and other standard DDA terms. And so, based on all of that, staff's recommendation is that the option agreement be approved. I wanted to highlight that we have reached out to the community. This item was heard at the April Transbay CAC meeting. They were supportive and endorsed the project. They did have a couple of comments, which is to ask us as we move forward that there be a thoughtful integration of the affordable units throughout the project, that there be consideration of how Transbay Block 3 or the Transbay Park will be programmed, that there includes some high-quality children's programming, considering the large number of families we would anticipate in the project, and that there be high-quality design, both exterior and for the unit design for the affordable residents. And so for the next steps, the estimated timing would be if the board approves the option agreement this month, we would anticipate that the TJPA and the developer would close on Parcel F in June. And then we would spend the remainder of 2016 working with the development team to have their affordable developer join the team. We'd work on a design concept and the basic programming, and then really get into the meat of design approvals and DDA negotiations in 2017. And as I mentioned, the temporary terminal needs to be removed. We anticipate that being removed by early 2018, as the transit center is scheduled to open late 2017, and at that point the site would be available for development. So that concludes my presentation. I have representatives of both the development team and the TJPA are here if you have any questions for them, as well as for myself, and thank you for your time.
All right, thank you. We have a couple questions in queue. Supervisor Peskin.
So just relative to the $3 million discount from $45 million to $42 million, if the temporary terminal has not been abandoned by 30 June 2018, what is the timeline for the completion of Transbay and the abandonment and demolition of the temporary terminal?
Well, I think we all anticipate that the temporary terminal would be off by that point because we have, as I mentioned, there's 3 OCI blocks that are on 2, 3, and 4. We don't have a specific other time frame, for next steps other than to continue to work with the TJPA. But at this point, we don't anticipate it being past that point. It's just sort of a caveat. Should it not be, there is a discount mechanism built into the option agreement.
Right. No, I mean, while I did dissent on the vote, this body just loaned the TJPA a little bit north of $250 million, and to the extent that their project continues to come in late and over budget, it just gives me a little heartburn to think that that might cost us an additional $3 million in a reduced floor from 45 to 42 million. I mean, is there any arrangement that if they fail, that TJPA will reimburse the city that $3 million?
Well, I would turn to representatives of the TJPA who are here, who could probably better answer that question for you, Supervisor.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Mark Zabani, the Interim Executive Director with the Transbay Joint Powers Authority.
Wait, what's your name?
Mark Zabani.
Mark
The interim-
Zabanian.
Yeah,
You're the new executive director.
yes, the Interim Executive Director.
Interim.
Yes,
Nice to meet you.
nice to meet you as well. So our current schedule is to open the Transit Center in December 2017. We saw no reason why we would not vacate the Parcel 4 and the rest of the temporary terminal before June of 2018. So we're pretty confident that that land, Block 4, Block 3 as well, and the adjacent block would be available by June 2018 for the developers.
So you have a 6-month cushion, is what you're telling us.
Yes.
And if you fail to perform?
I will not fail to perform.
Perfect. That's a good answer. Of course, you're only the interim director, so who knows whether you'll be the permanent director.
That's not up to me.
What do you want to do? Any other questions?
That's good.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Weiner has a question.
Thank you very much. Just a question about the presentation. So thank you for this, and it's really exciting that the project, we hope, will move forward. And I think the 45% affordable is terrific. One thing I want to just get sort of clarification on something, because of course nothing is free. And so there is you stated, and it's also stated somewhere in the in the presentation, that there's no public subsidy to get to that 45%. And so the $45 million purchase price, that fair market, the valuation that led to this purchase price was based on the assumption that 45% of the units would be below market rate?
Correct. That is based on where we know the pipeline of projects in Transbay, we know that Block 4 has to be at least 45%.
Right. So in other words, in making that fair market value calculation, the 45% of affordability number was sort of baked into that valuation.
Yes, and actually the Community Redevelopment Law Section 33433 sort of allows that for that consideration, what they call fair reuse value, and we sort of shorthand call it just the fair market value. But yes, to take into account any restrictions that have to be in place.
So I'm going to just hazard a guess that if instead of it being 45%, that it were, let's go to the extreme, which none of us wants, 0% affordable. If this is just being sold for market rate development with no, or let's say 12%, whatever the minimum would be under San Francisco law, that the valuation of the property would be higher than $45 million.
That is correct. The affordable housing does have an impact on the land value.
Right. So if it were 20%, it would, instead of 45%, it would be a higher valuation.
Correct.
So it's, and I know it's all just how you phrase it there, even though it's correct that OCII is not cutting a check to say here's a public subsidy so that you can build more affordable housing, OCII is certainly going to receive less of a lower purchase price because of the higher affordability number than it would have received had it been a lower affordability number.
Yes, that's correct. All of our Transbay parcels sort of operate on the same principle. When if we were to issue an RFP, we would state what the minimum requirements would be, and people would bid based on those requirements. Yeah,
and I'm not in any way criticizing that. I think again, 45% is awesome. But what I'm saying is, I don't think it's really necessarily accurate to say there's no public subsidy. There is a public subsidy in getting to the higher inclusionary number. The OCII, in other words, really the city, is receiving a lower purchase price. So we are, just like in 160 Folsom, the OCII basically gave the land in exchange for the higher affordability. So there's always so there is a public subsidy here because OCII is receiving less money than it would have for a lower inclusionary percentage.
Yes, technically, I'll just say that TJPA will be the one to receive the land sale proceeds. Just to
well, let's just say the government, public entities are. So I just think it's important to. I don't think it's accurate to say that there is no subsidy. Maybe not from OCII, but there is a government subsidy that is going in the form of a reduced purchase price that is pushing the affordability up to 45%. I think sometimes in this building there are some people who like to sort of pretend that we're just forcing the developer to do some high percentage and beating up the developer and squeezing it out of the developer when that might be true for a portion of the inclusionary, but there's also a portion of the inclusionary where we are subsidizing it, which I totally support. Affordable housing is affordable housing, and we should be providing those subsidies to help increase the percentage, but I just think it's important to be very transparent that there is an actual public subsidy going on here.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Let's, if you're done with your presentation, okay. Let's go ahead and take public comment. Public comment is open for item number 2. Please come up to the podium if you have questions or a statement. Welcome, Ian.
Thank you, Supervisors. Ian Lewis, Research Director with Local 2, the Hotel and Restaurant Workers Union. I really appreciate the comments of Supervisor Peskin and Supervisor Wiener on the subject, focusing on these questions of affordable housing and what we're paying for them. Obviously, there's a very close nexus, and this project highlights that, between hotel development and the need in our city for affordable housing. The question of in what circumstances workers will be able to organize a union and thereby win the kind of livable wages that allow them to live in this city is obviously a huge focus of ours. I was assured out in the hallway prior to this meeting that the project sponsors intend to negotiate a card-check neutrality agreement with our union prior to final entitlements, and we're looking forward to working with them towards that end. Obviously, that's of huge importance as the city finally decides whether it is appropriate to have a hotel in Parcel F. The question of the quality of jobs and the impact that those jobs will have on the need for affordable housing is squarely in the jurisdiction of the city, the Planning Commission, and ultimately the Board of Supervisors under Section 303. And so I look forward to further dialogue on that question. And again, thank you for raising the questions. Bye.
Thank you. Any other member of the public to speak at this time?
Is there anybody on behalf of the prospective purchaser who wants to confirm the statements made by the previous speaker?
Good afternoon, Supervisors. I'm Cameron Faulkner with Hines. I can certainly confirm that we've got in our
Can you speak into the mic or speak up?
Sorry. In our purchase and sale agreement with the TJPA, we do have an agreement to follow the labor representation policy of the TJPA. So I think we're covered there with an agreement that any project, since we haven't applied yet for Parcel F, we do intend to be a mixed-use project. Our intent is to have a hotel component, and so that is the plan, although we haven't submitted yet. And that if it include a hotel or restaurant as the terms of the labor representation policy are set forth, then we do comply with those requirements, and that does include that card check neutrality. So I think we've already agreed in our PSA to take care of that. Thanks.
Thank you for your very important comments. Anyone else? All right, public comment is closed at this time. Colleagues, if you note, this item is agendized as a committee report, so the motion will need to specify that. Is there a motion, Mr. Peskin?
Without objection.
Okay, all right. A motion has been made by Supervisor Wiener, and without objection, this motion passes. And the motion is to move this out of committee as a committee report.
Yes, Supervisor made the motion to...
Supervisor Wiener made the motion.
Supervisor Wiener made the motion to recommend this matter as committee report to tomorrow's Board of Supervisors meeting.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Mr. Clerk, can you call item 3?
Item number 3, ordinance designating 35 through 45 Onondaga Avenue, a.k.a. Alameda Emergency Hospital and Health Center, assesses parcel block number 6956, lot numbers 016 and 017 as the landmark under Planning Code Article 10.
Excellent. Supervisor Avalos is the author of this item. He's right here. And Supervisor Avalos, we're ready for you.
Great. Thank you, Chair Cohen, and thank you for scheduling this landmark designation ordinance. I appreciate the discussion we'll have today on it. This is granting historic landmark designation to 2 buildings on Onondaga, 35 Onondaga and 45 Onondaga. 35 Onondaga, the brick building was a former emergency hospital that was built in 1933. That was part of San Francisco's emergency hospital system, which was in existence till about 1978. After 1978, the emergency hospital was used for other purposes, health-related. Adult day health care was one of the last resources that way it was used in through the mid-2000s. The other site was a health center at 45 Onondaga, which is an example of Spanish Revival architecture designed by Charles H. Sawyer back in 1933. That site, that building also has two very, very significant murals by Bernard Zackheim, who had painted murals in frescoes in Coit Tower. These are two frescoes, one called Birth, the other called Community Spirit, that we have in District 11. Because those are significant murals, and Bernard Zackheim for his work in San Francisco at Coit Tower and other places, we want to make sure that we can provide landmark designation for this site as well. Both buildings are significant for their architecture and the aesthetic value of their architecture, and we have a huge community interest in making sure that we can landmark these buildings. In particular, the New Mission Terrace Improvement Association has filed an application that was done by Lisa Dunseth, and I want to thank her for doing that, moving forward with this application. The Landmark Designation Commission had voted unanimously, I think it was unanimous, to grant designation of these two buildings, and so it's really carrying forward with the community spirit and the commission itself to make sure that we can make that designation from the Board of Supervisors. And we have a gentleman from the Planning Commission who is here to talk more about the projects. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Cohen and Supervisors. Tim Fry from the Planning Department. I just wanted to add a few comments to Supervisor Avalos's presentation. At the May of last year, the Historic Preservation Commission added 35 to 45 Onondaga to its landmark designation work program based on a community-sponsored application filed with the department. In February of this year, the Commission reviewed that historic landmark designation report, and in March of this year, it unanimously approved a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors for local landmark designation. And as Supervisor Avalos mentioned, the building is significant not only as part of a citywide health system of emergency hospitals that became one of the most comprehensive public health service centers in the United States. It was constructed in 1933, and as a final piece of that system, Supervisor Avalos also mentioned the building was designed by master city architect Charles Sawyer. The interior does include murals by Bernard Zackheim, and because of this, you will see there are interior character-defining features and exterior character-defining features that will be protected under this ordinance. Community members are in support of the designation, and Supervisor Avalos, as you've heard, is also in support. The Planning Department also supports the designation as it meets the established eligibility requirements, and I'm happy to answer any additional questions you may have regarding the HPC's review of this item. And that concludes my comments to you. Thank you.
Thank you. That's okay.
Thank you. If I may add, there's another thing I like about this designation, which is not related to the building itself, but I am just really excited that there's a part of San Francisco that's named after the Finger Lakes in New York. Onondaga, Oneida, Otsego, Seneca, and Cayuga, they're all in this general region of District 11, and that has a very significant historical designation for our country, that the Iroquois Nation was a founding body for our Constitution, based on the pacts that the Iroquois Nation had made together to form their confederacy. So just want to throw that in there just for a little fun.
Mr. Peskin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to thank Supervisor Avalos for sponsoring this, and the Planning Department and the Historic Preservation Commission for their work. It is a great case report to read. I really enjoyed reading it this weekend and would be honored to be listed as a co-sponsor of the ordinance.
All right, thank you. Are there any members of the public that'd like to speak on this item? Please come up. Public comment is open. Mr. Rotman.
Overhead, please. My name is Richard Rothman, and sort of rediscovered these. These were really lost in the city. Whatever, it was listed in 1950 when the Art Commission did a survey, but it was sort of forgotten about. I found out about them when the real estate department was going to sell a building and told the Art Commission, and also I happened to be talking to Bernard Zackheim's daughter, who told me about these, and these are the two murals here. This one on the bottom here. Well, first, Bernard Zackheim, he was born in Poland. He came to the United States. He studied under Diego Rivera. Probably his most famous mural was the one at Coit Tower. And then his other famous one was at the Tolan Hall up at UCSF, and if you haven't seen those, you should see them. This one here, you can see the two of them, growth and community spirit. This one was painted over or whitewashed, who knows why. And then this one here is a community spirit. These are just really beautiful murals, and they should be open to the public so that the public can enjoy them. And here's another mural here of showing these beautiful murals. And we hope that making it a landmark will keep it in the city ownership so that the Art Commission will have ownership of the mural, and that will be taken care of and can be enjoyed by everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rothman. Are there any other members of the public that'd like to speak on this item?
Supervisors, I'd like to, my name is David Hooper. I get to serve as the president of the New Mission Terrace Improvement Association, the jewel in the crown of the Excelsior. I'd like to thank Supervisor Avalos, and I'd especially like to thank Richard Rothman for having supported this effort. Richard, because of his enthusiasm initially for the Zackheim murals, I've learned, and other members of the community have learned to appreciate his interest, the potential for these buildings in terms of serving the community in the future as they have in the past, the significance historically about the idea of community health from the emergency health system, which was funded and voted on before the Great Depression. This is a significant effort. The last major use these buildings had was for senior health services. Those services are still necessary, all the more necessary in the community. This gives the neighborhood and the community a chance to focus on improving Mission Street and the adjacent areas. I'm not going to take the full 2 minutes. This is a great idea. A lot of people have done work, and I'd especially thank Lisa Dunseth for having made the effort. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for your comments. Next speaker.
Good afternoon, supervisors. My name is Linda Lighthizer. I live in Mission Terrace, and I'm representing FACE, a group called Friends and Advocates of Crocker, Amazon, and the Excelsior. And this is the sort of project that FACE was started about. We celebrate and advocate for the rich cultural heritage and history of our neighborhood, and this is such a wonderful example of that. Our community is rich with artists, and for us to discover unknown murals and also to be able to save a historic building is particularly significant for us. Our community will rally around restoration and community activation projects to make these buildings be all they can be. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. All right, seeing none, public comment is closed at this time. Supervisor Avalos, is there anything else that you'd like to share?
No, I just want to thank members of the public for coming out, Mr. Rothman as well for your great work on helping to preserve these murals. The Community Spirit mural was actually accidentally found. They were doing a little bit of work on the wall, and they were moving some of the paint, and they saw that there was, lo and behold, some artwork below the surface. And so they spent a couple of months clearing that off and showing more of the great artwork that's been there. And so it is just great that we can actually weigh in and provide landmark designation for these buildings. Thank you.
Mr. Peskin?
And I just want to say that Bernard Zackheim's daughter, Ruth, who is alive and well, and her son, Bernard's grandson, Adam, of Volcano, California, contacted me last week to say that they are very pleased and excited about the landmarking of this edifice and of Bernard's work that is inside of it. So, good thing all around.
Yeah, this is a great thing. Supervisor Avalos, my compliments to you. This is excellent. And I would agree with the public commenter that described, I believe it was this project as the jewel in the crown of the Excelsior. If there's no further comments from my colleagues, public comment is closed at this time. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
All right, motion made by Supervisor Peskin, and without objection, that motion passes unanimously. That motion is with a positive recommendation.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Is there any other business before this body?
That completes the agenda for today.
Thank you very much. This meeting is adjourned.
Okay.